The tale unfolds in a rugged, desolate terrain where Gangyu, exhausted yet resolute, has the white-haired villain, Huang, pinned to the ground. The tension between them crackles in the air. Huang's eyes, cold and unfeeling, lock onto Gangyu's, a flicker of amusement dancing in their depths. "You're different from those worthless fools," Huang rasps, glancing the destruction he wrought upon Gangyu's team. "Shut up," Gangyu growls, his voice trembling with barely suppressed fury. A cruel smile curls Huang's lips. "You're the only one who can kill me anyway." Gangyu's fists tighten, the urge to crush Huang nearly overwhelming. Yet, a promise to his team echoes in his mind: never take a life, always uphold justice and the law. Unbeknownst to Gangyu, the weight of this promise will haunt him. On the news, Huang has been sentenced to death. The footage shows him wearing a suppression device on his collar, being hauled away to Ruculus, a prison for vicious criminals. The image shifts to Gangyu's former team being honored. A call from Gangho, Gangyu's brother and a corrections officer at the prison where Huang is held, snaps him back to reality. Gangyu looks down at his hands, memories of sparing Huang flooding back. His team leader's words echo, "No matter what, killing isn't a choice." The decision's weight bears down heavily. Sharing his inner turmoil with Gangho, Gangyu finds a kindred spirit. Gangho nods, agreeing with their leader. "You made a promise, Gangyu. You kept your word. That's what a hero does." Gangho reassures him, "I'll be one of the officers in charge of supervising Huang's execution. You've done everything you could as a hero. Let the correction officers take care of the rest." Later, at a solemn funeral, Gangyu feels the world's weight pressing down. A week later, on the day of Huang's execution, numb with grief, Gangyu receives devastating news: Gangho is dead. "Why?" Gangyu cries out, his voice choked with despair. Why did his brother have to die instead of the monster who had terrorized their world? The warden, Seonju, a woman with eyes of steely resolve, approaches. She hands Gangyu a tablet, her voice filled with empathy. "This is what happened the day your brother died." The video reveals Huang, smirking at Gangho as he's escorted to the execution room. "You're his brother, aren't you?" Huang asks, malice dripping from his voice. Gangho doesn't reply. Huang continues, "Tell me, how does it feel to be the executioner? One touch and they're gone." Gangho responds, "I have nightmares, feeling guilty, especially when I'm asleep. The prisoners I executed haunt my dreams." As Huang is strapped to the execution chair, Gangho asks for his last words. Huang repeats his question. Gangho presses the button, initiating the countdown. Suddenly, a blackout. Huang, his eyes gleaming with manic delight, breaks free. The deactivated collar shatters. "He is a monster unleashed. Only he can kill me," Huang declares, talking about Gangyu, his smile widening psychotically. Amid the chaos, an officer attempts to warn his colleagues. Huang approaches, and in a brutal display, the officer erupts into a bloody mess. Gangho watches in horror. Huang stands in front of Gangho, happily saying that he thinks Gangho is the older brother of Gangyu. Furious and grieving, Gangho charges with a baton. But Huang rips his arm off effortlessly. In agony, Gangho tries to fight back, but Huang swiftly snaps his head off. Gangyu is devastated. His brother, killed by the man he refused to kill. The decision's weight becomes unbearable. Seonju speaks, "The EMP strike affected every prisoner in Ruculus. We stopped them from breaking out, but many officers are trapped. We don't know who launched the attack." She looks at Gangyu, unwavering. "We need your help to quell the riot." "I'll do it," he answers without hesitation. "But on one condition." Walking towards the prison, his steps are heavy with purpose. The heavy metal doors creak open, revealing a torrent of freed prisoners, surging forward in a tide of chaos. Gangyu stands before them, eyes cold and unforgiving. He has failed his team and his brother. Now, he will become their executioner, ensuring justice is served. The prisoners, confused by the hero in a guard's uniform, hesitate. A group decides to take matters into their own hands, making their first mistake. Gangyu punches a hole through a prisoner's chest, the sickening sound echoing through the halls. The impact causes a shockwave, blowing nearby prisoners away. Gangyu pulls out a microphone. "Everyone in Ruculus," he announces through the PA system, "will be executed immediately." The line between right and wrong blurs as Gangyu takes justice into his own hands. The room fills with shouting and chaos as the prisoners voice their disagreement. Amidst the chaos, one prisoner saw an opportunity to escape with his superhuman speed. But before he could even blink, Gangyu had already killed him with a powerful kick. The room falls silent as the reality of the situation sets in. Gangyu then gave the prisoners a choice: wear their suppression devices again and wait for their execution, or die at his hands immediately. One prisoner was defiant and said, "This is no choice at all. Might as well die trying to escape this prison." The prisoners began to talk amongst themselves, weighing their options. As some of the prisoners were about to put their suppression devices again, that same prisoner screamed. He seems to have an ability connected to his voice. Shocked, everyone looked at him. Again, unafraid of the consequences, the prisoner spoke up. "Gangyu is only one person. With teamwork, we can defeat him and escape this prison. Don't be intimidated by him." The room falls silent as the other prisoners consider his words. Gangyu remembers that Hillison is a dangerous criminal. He has a special superpower that allows him to empower those around him by shouting. On the ground floor holds serial killers who have taken the lives of several innocent people. In the first basement, criminals who have put entire towns in danger. The second basement is reserved for those who have terrorized entire cities. The third basement holds those who have made entire nations vulnerable. In the fourth basement, we have villains who have posed a threat to entire continents. And on the fifth basement floor holds criminals who have put the entire world in a state of terror. Meanwhile, Huang discovers the sole female villain in his cell and decides that sparring with her could be a fun way to pass the time. Going back to Gangyu, Hillison let out a scream which strengthened the inmates around him and proceeds to attack our hero. Everyone sprung into action, confronting Gangyu with all their might, only to face a brutal counterattack that left only a few still standing. Gangyu is too powerful. With a single jump, he raises his leg to strike the ground. The force of his stomp obliterates almost everyone in the vicinity. The tremors are felt throughout the entire prison. One prisoner seems to recognize the person responsible for the tremors. Hillison and the other prisoners are still suspended in the air from the force of Gangyu's stomp. Gangyu readies his next attack, muttering the word "mode" under his breath. The prisoners try to stop him, but it's too late. With a single word, Gangyu impales every single prisoner with his sharp red claws. Of course, none of them stood a chance against him. With a simple report of the executed prisoners, Gangyu walks towards his next destination, the solitary confinement cell. Gangyu, a member of the equality team, started wondering about the amount of inmate he has killed since he entered the prison. Dozens? Hundreds? He always offers them a choice before executing them: to be good and put on the suppression devices or face immediate death. But not all villains comply. The big one attacked Gangyu, who responded by ripping the man's head off with a swift kick. The second villain tried to trick Gangyu, but ultimately failed as well. In the middle of this, Gangyu remembered the words spoken by the villain who fought his former teammate, Tomi, in the past. Tomoki, the villain, said, "Heroes who don't have any physical type abilities will never know how ecstatic it is to crush a person with only bare hands." Gangyu wondered to himself, is this it? It just feels like he's crushing eggs with his fist. Gangyu opened the door of the solitary cell, which holds Chuck Fielder, a villain they captured in the past. Chuck was a cannibal. Back then, upon seeing a pot of freshly cooked human remains, Gangyu felt furious and was about to kill the man, but his leader, Rausa, stopped him. And so Gangyu did, but he felt unsatisfied, knowing that men like him didn't deserve any mercy. Chuck continued to mock and goad Gangyu, who promptly beheaded the man. Unfortunately, it was one of his abilities, and the man continued to talk. Seems like Chuck gets off on the knowledge that the last thing their victims remember is them. He also had the power of illusions, and as he was about to name his victims one by one, Gangyu cut his arm off. In a last-ditch effort to stop Gangyu from killing him, Chuck drew illusions of the equality team. But Gangyu was undeterred, cutting through the illusions to get to the villain, who he then proceeded to cut in half. Before his final breath, the villain called Gangyu a monster and claiming he is no different than Huang. Gangyu's jaw clenches, his fists tightening at his sides as he struggles to contain his rage. He remained silent, his murderous expression speaking volumes. Meanwhile, remember when Huang found himself face to face with the only female villain on this floor in Chapter 2? He looked forward to fighting her. But to his surprise, she didn't even attempt to defend herself. Bored of the lack of challenge, Huang made a decision to move on and head up to meet Gangyu without further delay. Outside the Ruculus, 3 individuals stand overlooking the prison, including a girl named Sinka. Sinka becomes visibly excited as she witnesses Gangyu repeatedly killing prisoners below. Her excitement escalates to the point where she proclaims Gangyu as her future husband. Continuing their conversation from the previous chapter, Canis the big guy said, "Sinka, you need to remember that you already claimed Huang as your husband." Gato the woman agrees and said, "And we initiated the EMP strike to save Huang for that very purpose." Debate ensues amongst the group about who Sinka should choose as her husband. Sinka will pick whoever survives between the two of them as her unlucky husband. Cut to Gangyu, determined and focused on his mission. Seonju warns him about the dangers of going deeper into the prison. She said, "Prisoners get stronger the more you go down. It would be wise to get some rest." Gangyu replied, "I don't need rest. I plan to kill everyone in Ruculus and find out who is responsible for the EMP strike." The warden asked Gangyu for a favor as he descended to the lower basement floors. "Help the officers who are stuck down there," she implored. They haven't been able to send messages. The inmates destroyed all communication devices, except for the one in the 5th basement floor. It's as if someone wants us to watch them kill without remorse. Despite the warden's warning, Gangyu continues on his mission. As they open the door to the 1st basement floor, the duo is immediately attacked by prisoners. Seonju is held up and choked by one of the inmates. The inmate turned around to brag about his actions to his fellow inmates, but he was met with a chilling sight. Every single one of his inmates was laying on the ground, lifeless. The inmate's expression shifted from one of triumph to one of shock and horror. He looked up just in time to see Gangyu poised to strike at him, and it was the last thing he saw. Gangyu then advised the warden not to stay when they opened the basement floors as she might get attacked again. But before they separated ways, the warden then informed him that Tomoki, the villain his former teammate Tomi caught, is in the 1st basement floor, which is his next destination. Meanwhile, the prisoners in the 1st basement floor are wondering what is happening above them and if they manage to escape the prison. Tomoki just called them idiots for not using their brains. The big guy is offended and attacks Tomoki. But before he can land a hit, Tomoki slices him in half. Tomoki calmly suggests that everyone should listen to her if they want to survive. She reveals that he has insider knowledge of Gangyu's abilities, as she was also an ex-hero like him. Tomoki urges the group to trust her, emphasizing that they have a chance to defeat Gangyu if they follow her plan. One of the other inmates, a man with a skeptical expression, questioned her statement. "You're only a third-rate hero compared to Gangyu, who is part of the Equality, a team of first-rate heroes." She then told them about how Rausa, the leader of Equality, reformed the entire hero industry. She made sure the teams trained together and abolished killing and the ranking system. Gangyu joined after all of that and was infamous for not having any reputation before joining Equality. Many speculated that Rausa and Gangyu were lovers, solely because of that. The skeptical inmate then expressed his doubts. "How can we even fight against Gangyu? He wiped out the entire ground floor by himself." Tamaki believed that all the prisoners above them were weaklings and that any of her fellow inmates could do what Gangyu did. She assured the other inmates that she knew Gangyu's weakness. After hearing Tomoki's words, everyone joined her in her plan. Superpowers have been observed and documented for centuries, and they can be grouped into 3 main categories: physical type, creation type, and special type. Physical type superpowers include abilities such as super strength, speed, and durability. Creation type superpowers include abilities such as elemental control, telekinesis, and energy manipulation. Special type superpowers are abilities that don't fall under the first 2 categories. These can include powers such as time travel, teleportation, and mind reading. The inmates have commenced with their plan, and their communication is being maintained by a physical type superpower called brainwave communication. Tomoki, back in her hero era, got to observe Gangyu training, and one thing that stuck out to her was that he never dodges an attack. That's how strong he was. He didn't need to dodge, because he could withstand any attack that came his way. Because of this, she thought that by distracting him with range attacks, she could have someone slip something unexpected past him. She relied on that fact and never considered Gangyu as stronger than any other first-tier hero, and that was the first flaw in her plan. They stuck 30 power suppressors on him, thinking that it would definitely have an effect. But they were wrong. Unsurprisingly, he wasn't the least affected by it. The inmates panicked and moved to the next phase of the plan, bringing out the hostages. That was the second flaw in their plan. Gangyu's superpower isn't limited to physical strength. Some tried to surrender, but it was too late. He then killed everyone around him with a sword using his special type superpower. The third and last flaw was that she tried to win against someone who's way above her league. Someone she had no chance of winning against. The skeptical inmate confronts her after her plan fails, leading to a heated argument. She reacts impulsively and kills him out of frustration. As she looks around, she spots the officer she had used as a chair attempting to flee. She moves to eliminate him as well, but before she could, Gangyu arrives on the scene, interrupting her next move. Tomoki, the villain who killed anyone she came across to, confronted Gangyu about the fate of the hero's inequality. Gangyu confirmed that his teammates were all indeed dead. Tomoki's thoughts turned to her sister, Tomi, who was once a member of Gangyu's team. Tomi looked up to Tomoki, admiring her older sister's heroic deeds. But in reality, Tomoki had always felt uneasy about the hero industry. Heroes hunt villains, yet they're granted immunity when they cause civilian casualties. They think they're above the law. Tomoki's desire to save people wasn't driven by altruism. She enjoyed the feeling of superiority she got from saving lives. Her behavior escalated, and she started killing villains and heroes, especially those who were weaker than her. Tomi, who lacked powers like her sister, got worried about Tomoki's behavior. One night, Tomi followed Tomoki to an alley and witnessed her sister's true nature. That's when Tomi's powers activated, and she registered as a hero, vowing to bring her sister to justice. And now, in the present, Tomoki asks Gangyu about Tomi's death. Tomoki asked, "How did Tomi die?" Gangyu replied, "She died fighting against Hwang. And in her last breath, she called out to you, asking you to save her." Tomoki didn't know how to feel about that. Instead, she attacked Gangyu, lunging at him with all her might. But Gangyu, with his quick reflexes, evaded her attack and positioned himself behind her. Tomoki turns around to attack, only to see Gangyu's leg about to hit her face. She's thrown across the room and tries to lunge forward again, but gets hit in the stomach. Exhausted, Tomoki reverts back to her human form. Gangyu, though a bit saddened to kill a former teammate's family, holds a determined look in his eyes. Tomoki begs for her life, but Gangyu, unable to care less for a remorseless killer, punched her until she died. The sounds of Gangyu's attacks echo through the prison, made one psychopath fall in love, instilling fear in some, and giving another psychopath something to look forward to. Hwang, excited by the commotion, prepares to break through the wall to get to Gangyu. But before he can, an old man appears, shocking Hwang with a hit to the side. The old man is Kingston, the oldest prisoner in Ruculus. But what could he want with Hwang? The officers, under the Sei-Unjo's orders, called her attention, directing her to the 5th basement floor. Meanwhile, Kingston and Hwang met, their confrontation captured on camera. Sei-Jun, observing, hoped for Hwang's demise, believing Kingston was less terrifying. Hwang was disinterested in playing, but Kingston's persistence left no room for refusal. Kingston, the first criminal ever locked up in Ruculus, had a unique history. Unlike the majority in basements 4 and 5, who had killed millions, Kingston had only 3 victims, one notorious villain and 2 of the strongest heroes of his time. He killed them solely to prove his strength, but their easy defeat left him disappointed. Seeking a challenge, he allowed himself to be captured. The strained relations between the government and the Heroes Association delayed his execution for 30 years. Back to the present, Kingston continued, "I don't plan on killing you. I just want to play a little game." Hwang, seeing it as a way to pass time, agreed. He used his superpower to levitate the guards' corpses, transforming them into bloody meatballs and hurling them at Kingston. Kingston, with his martial arts prowess, shattered the meatballs, causing a gruesome rain of blood. Kingston observed Hwang's technique. Despite the appearance of telekinesis, he sensed a different power at play. Hwang taunted, "There's no point in killing an old man who'll end up dying of old age." Kingston's eyes flared with anger. "You're an arrogant brat." He continued to say that Hwang was too self-absorbed to consider he might not be the greatest. With a mighty stomp, Kingston cracked the ground beneath him. Shockwaves rippled through the prison, inciting chaos among the guards. Sei-Unjo tried to calm them, asserting the prison's ability to withstand even the strongest hero's powers. Kingston poised to strike Hwang with both feet, his powerful form hurtling through the air. Hwang stood there, wide-eyed, watching the oncoming assault. The impact caused a massive explosion, sending debris flying in all directions. As the dust settled, it revealed a giant hole where Kingston had been. He had used the attack to make his escape, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Impressing Huang, who decided to follow him. Before Huang could leave, a woman named Sinka called out to him. She urged him to stay and talk. Prison guards and Sejun were astonished, unfamiliar with Sinka and her followers. As they conversed, Se-unju and guards panicked, realizing Sinka was an intruder. Sinka, aware of their surveillance, abruptly ended the video stream. Meanwhile, Gangyu reported to the warden about clearing the first basement floor. His audio cut off. Unfazed, he proceeded to the second basement floor. Arriving, he found it eerily empty. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence. He turned to see a female officer chased by two aggressive dogs. The officer, mistaking him for his brother, Gangho, called out desperately. Reacting swiftly, Gangyu used his powers to subdue the dogs. The woman, relieved, hugged him, thinking he was Gangho. Gangyu gently stopped her, explaining, "I'm not Gangho. I'm his brother, Gangyu." Confusion clouded her face. She wondered why the hero Gangyu was there in a corrections officer's uniform. Gangyu guessed she must be a colleague of his brother and warned her of the danger. Interrupting, she called him brother-in-law and introduced herself as his sister-in-law. Stunned, Gangyu struggled to process this unexpected revelation. Meanwhile, on the same floor, two figures who seemed like siblings stood surrounded by inmates and officers, all marked by eerie halos above their heads. They spoke in hushed tones about the outsider, Gangyu, wondering how many sins he had committed. For the sin of killing the dogs that chased his sister-in-law, the siblings condemned him, declaring he was destined for hell. Jehwan, a prison inspector and Gangho's pregnant girlfriend, stood before Gangyu. "We just found out," she said, her voice trembling. "Gangho and I'm pregnant. We plan to tell you after Huang's execution." They shifted to discussing his presence there. Gangyu confessed he had been commissioned as a special corrections officer, tasked with executing all prisoners in Ruculus. Jehwan's shock was palpable. "Why would you want to do this?" she demanded. Gangyu's expression darkened as he recounted the events of Huang's botched execution. Jehwan pressed further, inquiring about the mysterious EMP strike. He admitted they were still investigating. Her thoughts turned to Gangho. "Where is he?" she asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. Gangyu lied, saying, "He's stuck on the 5th basement floor, still sending rescue signals." Relief washed over her, but Gangyu could not shake the pang of guilt. He urged her to go upstairs for her safety, considering her pregnancy. But Jehwan, ever stubborn, refused. She explained her unique ability to read memories by looking into someone's eyes, an asset in distinguishing the guilty from the innocent. Jehwan detailed the situation on the 2nd basement floor, prisoners controlled by the siblings Meal and Mile, whose summoning powers turned victims into puppets. Gangyu knew them well. They were Mago's pupils, his late teammate. He argued against needing her help, but Jehwan insisted. Some of the puppets were prison officers, and her ability could discern officers from inmates. Gangyu retorted that those turned into puppets were as good as dead. "They're not," Jehwan countered. "They return to themselves once freed from the siblings' power." Gangyu was skeptical. "The siblings won't let you do that." "I can persuade them," Jehwan insisted. "It's not safe. Think about the baby," Gangyu urged. Jehwan, unwavering in her duty, agreed reluctantly but reminded him of her responsibilities as an officer. Resigned, Gangyu used his power to encase her in a breathable cocoon, ensuring her safety as they proceeded. They marched towards the isolation cell, encountering eerie human-like puppets with halos. Jehwan identified them as Meal's creations and pointed out which were officers. Gangyu closed the cocoon to shield her from what he was about to do. From a distance, the siblings Meal and Mile watched through a glass orb, wary of the intruder. Mile trembled with fear, but Meal, calm and assured, believed it wouldn't be easy for Gangyu to defeat them. The confrontation was inevitable, each step fraught with the tension of what lay ahead. Jehwan gasped as Gangyu opened the cocoon, allowing her to see again. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. Gangyu apologized, explaining, "I isolated the corrections officers and killed all the prisoners." Jehwan's eyes widened in shock. "All the execution devices are on sublevel 5. "I killed them myself," Gangyu admitted. Her shock turned to horror. "A hero killing someone? Whose idea was this?" "It was mine," Gangyu replied flatly. "And the warden agreed to it?" Jehwan's anger flared when she learned the warden had given her consent. "That bitch." A corrections officer's job is to rehabilitate. Gangyu was unmoved by her outburst. He had heard her arguments countless times. To him, her idealism was impractical in a world overrun by irredeemable villains who caused endless suffering. Heroes and civilians died because of these monsters, and someone had to put them down. He didn't care if he was supposed to be a hero. Gangyu vehemently disagreed. Each criminal in the lower basements has killed thousands. They all deserve to die. With people like you, with psychometric powers, no one has been wrongly convicted. So, what's the difference if they die by my hand or through the justice system? Villains are still human, Jehwan argued. Jehwan insisted, they have stories, Gangyu. Meal and Mal have stories. Everyone has a story, especially the victims, Gangyu sighed. What difference does it make? They'll still die. Desperate, Jehwan pleaded for Gangyu to see reason, but he was resolute. They continued down the path and encountered another strange humanoid figure with a halo, this time blood-colored and covered in thorns. Before Gangyu could strike, Jehwan spoke. Gangyu would be really sad if he found out about this. Fury blazed in Gangyu's eyes. Her words echoed in his mind, fueling his anger. Dismissing her ideals, he slashed and punched through the prisoner-turned-puppets, his rage driving each blow. Somewhere in the prison, Cinca watched in amazement at Gangyu's ruthlessness. Back on their path, Gangyu and Jehwan encountered officers turned into puppets. At that moment, the siblings Meal and Mal emerged from their cell, accompanied by a tall humanoid figure. Gangyu felt a grim satisfaction. They had come to him, saving him the trouble of hunting them down.